Hi, this is a companion video to my last one about Spotify. You don't need to watch it, but it adds some extra context. When it comes to music streaming, it's hard to say Spotify's alternatives are much better. They may treat its musicians better, but I'd be hard pressed to say it's a big improvement. It is marginally better if anything, which is why a number of participating artists in the Spotify boycott has also removed their music from all streaming platforms. Spotify may pay like crap and is run by crappy people, but so is YouTube, Apple Music, Amazon, and Tidal, especially in comparison to what artists could and should be making, let alone many of their parent companies' involvement into the military-industrial complex or their regular invasion of privacy, among many other problems, which is the whole reason why we're boycotting. Yet, as the average music lover, it's hard to completely turn away from streaming. It is, bar none, the most convenient piece of technology in the digital age of media and entertainment. And if you want to be an ethical music consumer while being able to feed yourself week to week, there is no great alternative. This is the music streaming dilemma. For the cheap price of $10.99 per month, you can have access to all this. Roughly 70% of the world's music at your fingertips, with more being added by the second. It's downright intoxicating. And the idea of throwing all that away is painful, not just for its convenience, but because of how cheap it is. I may buy music physically and digitally, but I can't do it consistently. I barely have enough to feed myself, and music isn't my only interest, so whenever I do buy art, it always puts a dent in my wallet. I'm willing to bet that I'm not the only one. The cost of living is rising as inflation only gets worse and worse, and our wages aren't rising with it. No matter where you are in the world, us young folks are being gouged left and right, and there's not much we can do about it. When a lot of us are paying close to 50% of our wages on rent alone, whatever avenue of savings we have is needed. For a lot of us music lovers, it's streaming. As a young person who's probably living in a shared house or your parents' place trying to save money in a cramped room, you want to spend some money on music, but your wage isn't great, and you know you need to start saving if you want to retire at a reasonable age. So, when faced with the options of either spending close to $50 a month to listen to a dozen albums, or stream what feels like the world's library of music, that monthly $10.99 price tag becomes incredibly attractive. I know it is for me, and it sucks that it is. In lieu of streaming and buying music, you may be thinking of pirating. I like SoulSeek a lot. When I was younger, I was a pretty regular user, and to this day I still use it. Shout out to all my fellow cum eaters. But the way I use it is quite different. When I was 16 years old with zero disposable income and no streaming apps, it pretty much was the only way I could listen to music. Now at the ripe age of 24 with a little bit of disposable income and streaming apps, piracy is not something I do all that often. SoulSeek is where I go to find obscure albums I can't find anywhere else. Case in point, I love Bill Orcutt, however his albums which were released by Migo Editions were taken down when its founder died, not just from streaming platforms but digital storefronts as well. Which was unfortunate since his 2013 album, A History of Everyone, has one of the greatest renditions of Solidarity Forever that you will ever hear. I emailed Orcutt about where I could get his record, and he said my best option was through a CD copy. The worst part is there was no place where I could get a copy. No surprise considering it released more than 10 years ago and hasn't seen a reissue since. And buying a copy in Discogs would have incurred some extremely expensive delivery and import fees to where I live. However, on the vast landscape that is SoulSeek, there was a person who had shared a copy of it, and in FLAC, no less. Now repeat that instance by a dozen or so obscure and out of streaming albums and you understand why SoulSeek is so useful to me. But when I clicked download on Orcutt's LP, it felt icky. I quite literally asked the man himself how I could get it, he gave me an obviously good alternative, and yet here I was pirating his album. I've no idea how Orcutt actually feels about me resorting to pirating his album, but I can't imagine him being thrilled about it. And that sucks as someone who's a massive fan of his works. One of the reasons why I'd taken up streaming in the first place was that it was better to stream an album than to pirate it. Even if it's just a cent per play, I at least was paying something to them instead of taking it wholesale for free. Which is one of my biggest problems with pirating. Pirating music is a fantastic way to shove it to the techno oligarchs and big record labels. However, if you're anything like me, most of the music you listen to are from indie artists. Let's take my top 10 of 2024 for example. The only album released on a major label is Dark Times by Vince Staples. Everything else are from small labels and struggling musicians. Pirating all of it just feels icky. I feel like the last two segments sounds like me justifying still sticking to streaming platforms, because it is. I have to ponder, are my justifications enough to keep paying for my YouTube Premium subscription? I want to buy music from Bandcamp and record stores more often, but I also want to be able to feed myself through the month. And that sucks, especially when I'm well aware that my choice isn't all that better than Spotify. Google has a history of developing tech for military use. In fact, earlier in 2025, Google had started using their artificial intelligence for weapons development, going back on promises they made 7 years ago. In 2018, Google published their AI principles. It was essentially a set of public promises for their AI tech. One of these rules was to not pursue technologies that cause or are likely to cause harm. Actually, they also removed promises to not use their AI on weapons or tech which primarily causes injury, technology which gathers surveillance information, and tech which breaks human rights and international law. Google is currently part of Project Nimbus, a deal the Israeli government has with tech giants to provide their AI technology for military use. And it was reported by the New York Times that Google Photos was being used to surveil Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. This has resulted in internal protests by its staff. However, they've crushed anyone who has spoken up. If you want a good overview of just how fucked Google is, you just need to peruse the criticisms and controversies section on their Wikipedia page. Even then, when I look at other streaming platforms, it's not as if they're any better. Amazon is, well, Amazon, and Apple has a massive history of collaborating with governments, providing them with information on its users through very sketchy invasions of privacy and surveillance, and let's not forget their history of censorship, amongst other massive problems. I suppose between all the streaming apps, Tidal is probably the least morally reprehensible and the best option. Even then, it's hard to say it's the correct streaming app to switch to. Its parent company, Block, may not be involved in the military, but considering that Cash App, which they own, has been used to launder money and fund illegal activities, plus the fact they own Afterpay, which popularized the ever scummy buy now pay later model, it's hard to say they have their hands clean. At least they aren't funding weapons research or aren't openly invading its users' privacy and censoring them, which is depressing because somehow this is a high bar to reach. Frankly, I should switch to Tidal, except Tidal isn't available in my region, so that sucks. Obviously, the best option is quitting streaming entirely. Buying on Bandcamp and buying physically. That also means buying merch and going to concerts, but for many, when faced with this or paying rent while being able to save money, it becomes easier said than done. The information age has made music cheap, so cheap that it has become available for everyone to enjoy it easily and freely. It's incredible, but the flip side of that is artists have been royally shafted by massive corporations who realize this fact, more than they ever have. As Peter Sund, the co-founder of Pirate Bay, said in Liz Pelly's Mood Machine, Spotify's creators were advertising dudes who wanted to sell advertising and realized that music was cheap, and I think that can apply to the industry at large. And to help artists out, we need to do the right thing, but doing the right thing is hard. So hard, especially when you have to deal with your life problems. As I've said in my last video, this is why boycotts are such a hard sell, because the biggest pain in the ass about boycotts is that it becomes a pain in the ass. So, welcome to the era of music streaming, where you can never enjoy music without sacrificing something of yourself. Maybe it's your morality, maybe it's your financial security, unless you're well off, that is, and it sucks. Thanks everyone for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do leave a like and subscribe, or don't, I can't force you. If you want to support the channel, I have a Ko-fi page where you can donate, and I have a second channel where I upload music mixes, so if you want to hear what I've been listening to, you can subscribe to it. I also have an Instagram and Twitter, so if you want to keep up with whatever I'm doing, you can follow me there. So yeah, I'll see you all around.